Britain is a proud island nation. The surrounding seas have always been a vital source of food. But who profits most from the UK's offshore riches? For 4 decades, the EU made the key decisions, but then came Brexit.
Britain and the EU are locking horns over the terms of their future relationship, and places like this are on the front line. There is going to be a fight over fishing, and it could get ugly.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's taking back control of Britain's unrivaled marine resources. In France, they respond with talk of seaborne confrontation and economic retaliation. Could fishing sink hopes of post-Brexit collaboration? Dawn in Fraserburgh in deep midwinter. Scotland's northeast coast looks out on some of the best fishing grounds in the world. It's easy to see why Britain's fishermen have long felt isolated and ignored. To get to Fraserburgh from London involves a journey of 1,000 kilometres. You have to be up early to see what's come in with the overnight tide.
It's just after 7 o'clock on a very chilly morning, and we've arrived at the fish market. Let's go inside and see what they're selling this morning.
This morning, supplies are limited, so bidding is sharp, prices high. These fish will be on dinner tables in London and continental Europe within 24 hours.
9 bid 1 box, 9 bid 2.
Business may be brisk, but the mood is far from buoyant. The local fishing fleet that supplies this market has halved in size since Britain joined the EU.
Just describe to me how this market works.
We sell haddock, whiting, cod in one sale, and all the what we call rough. After that, monks, megrams, anything else goes in the second sale.
What kind of sale was it this morning? How much fish was around, and what were the prices like?
Just over 400 boxes. Prices were good, yes. Probably because of the track of weather we've had, there hasn't been much fish, so the price is good.
Just down the coast from Fraserburgh is Peterhead, one of Europe's biggest fishing ports. Harvest Hope is about to set sail on a 10-day trip far out into the North Atlantic on the hunt for cod and haddock.
Sid, wants to come aboard?
It's a big trip. How far offshore are you going?
We're going to be going as high as almost 300 miles west.
Wow.
In Rockall. Well, it's out in the Atlantic.
How many days is that?
Hopefully 8 days, but no more than 10 days for the quality. Keep the quality.
And do you need to go that far to find the best fish stocks?
Yes, it's lovely haddock we catch there, but it also keeps us out of the North Sea. It reduces the effort in the North Sea, and because the cod quota has been cut this year, we have less time to spend in the North Sea.
The amount of fish skipper James Stephen can catch is controlled by quota. And under the EU system, 60% of the quota for fish caught in UK waters belongs to non-British fishermen.
James, where are we going now?
We're now going down to the accommodation.
All right, well, I want to see this because I want to get a sense of how you guys live when you're on a 10-day trip. You've got to get used to these stairs.
Well, it's easy for me. And you want us to go in here?
Yeah, let's have a look at one of the cabins. So, this is it, sleeping quarters.
Sleeping quarters for the next 10 days, 8 to 10 days.
It's, well, let's be honest, it's cramped.
Well, it's what it is. It is what it is.
On day 9 and 10, are you getting pretty fed up being in here?
Yeah, well, I am now at my age.
James, I know that you've been in the fishing business a long time. What does this phrase that so many fishing people echo from Boris Johnson of taking back control What does it mean to you as a fisherman?
To me, taking back control is more important than taking back quota. The fishing stocks are moving further to the north. There's more and more effort now going into the UK basin. I would say at least 50% increase in the last 5 years, and we have to manage and control that effort, or I think we will see the finish of our industry.
So what, your contention is that the 65% or so of fish in UK waters that are currently taken by European, EU fishermen, all of that should go to the British, that there should be no European fishing in British waters?
I've never said that, and I don't think that would be correct. They have a right and entitlement to also fish in our waters, but at a favourable share. We were done an injustice in 1972 when Ted Heath took us into the European Union. We were sold down the river. All we're asking, or I'm asking, is that injustice is reversed.
So what represents justice to you?
I would like to see a bigger share of the stock.
How much?
We only take 35% of our economic zone. I would at least like to see that doubled. If you go to Norway, they take 85% of their stocks in their water. If you go to Iceland, they take 90%.
Yeah, but hang on a minute, James. If you did that, if you doubled the amount or the proportion of the fish in UK waters that was taken by UK fishermen, you would be destroying the livelihoods of many French, Belgian, Dutch, and other European fishermen. The Europeans aren't going to tolerate that.
I don't care. Take a look around this coast. There is a fraction, and I mean a fraction of the industry. There used to be 450 boats at least from the northeast corner. Now there are only over 100. So we have seen our coastal communities decimated, disappear. All we're asking is we get some of it back.
When it comes down to this negotiation, what is your message to the French, for example? The French fishing minister said the other day that unless the status quo is maintained and the access for French and other European fishermen is guaranteed in UK waters on pretty much the basis it is today, if that's not the case, then not a kilo of British fish will be sold in France. What do you say to him?
Well, not a French boat will fish in UK waters if I can't get a kilo of fish into France. Simple, tit for tat.
That sounds like open economic war on the sea.
So be it.
Deep sea fishing is a tough business. A couple of days after leaving Peterhead, James sent me these images of the steep swell whipped up by gale force winds. Still, at least he had found plenty of fish. Prime Minister Boris Johnson went to Peterhead to sell his vision of a rosy post-Brexit future for Britain's fishermen, liberated from Brussels control. But there are plenty of people in the seafood business who don't share his optimism. Denham is a family-owned fish processing business. To see the production line, you have to be kitted out.
Procedure
Right.
changed for coming out the factory.
So I'm going to have both the coat and the boots.
Yes,
Okay.
but you'll get a hair date first over there.
Yep.
What size of boots were you again?
I'm 11. How's that?
Perfect.
Am I looking better now?
Lovely. Just gorgeous.
Great. Okay, I am now ready for anything inside this plant.
This plant specialises in exporting mackerel and herring. More than 80% of their production is exported into the EU. The workers here are EU citizens from Eastern Europe. Roman, for example, was a trained lawyer from Latvia who came to Peterhead because he could earn more filleting fish.
I just decided to find a job abroad, and I came here and find a job in a fishing factory.
And you obviously quite like it because you've stayed here for a long time.
Yes, I'm staying here for 12 years already. I took mortgage, I bought my own flat to live, and I am absolutely satisfied of my life.
Brexit means the supply line of cheap labour from the EU will be cut off. Worse, if the EU imposes tariffs and a new customs regime on UK seafood exports, this place is in big trouble.
Robert, we speak at a time when the fishing industry is absolutely at the top of the political agenda because where we are in terms of Brexit and negotiating a trade deal. Do you regard this as a time of threat or opportunity for what you do?
Well, I would hope it would be opportunity, but the concerns we have obviously is a no-deal Brexit would be devastating for our industry because the export business is a major part of it.
You mean a no-trade deal where Britain walks away at the end of this year on WTO terms without any preferential trade arrangements at all?
That does not bear thinking about.
Why?
Well, we depend on the export market. The EU is a major export customer, and if we go to WTO rules and duties are applied on our fish, we will be uncompetitive.
So if the current standoff between the British government and the Europeans in terms of the fishing industry in the future continues, you are going to be looking at a situation where tariffs, taxes are put on your mackerel as you sell it into Europe. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, it would destroy our industry because if there are tariffs applied, we will have trouble getting raw material because we will not be able to pay our fishermen the market rate because we'll have to take into account a tariff when we sell the fish, which makes us uncompetitive.
So Britain's fishermen are talking tough to Europe while the processors are full of foreboding. It's a conflict of interest which the EU can exploit. Boulogne-sur-Mer on the north coast of France is separated from England by just 20 miles of water. But Brexit is creating a different sort of distance. There are 700 fishermen in this town. Some work on huge deep-sea trawlers, but most are on small family-owned boats which rely on EU-guaranteed access to UK waters.
Gaëtan!
Bonjour Steven.
Bonjour!
Gaëtan Delsart heads out on the Adèle Camille to lay lobster pots. His total annual quota of sole, turbot and shellfish adds up to little more than 30 tons. Tiny in terms of commercial fishing, but an entire livelihood for him and his crew.
Adèle Camille pour le port. Pour être tout à fait honnête, je comprends. Alors je me fais pas beaucoup d'amis en disant ça, mais je comprends les Britanniques quand ils ont voulu expulser un peu tout le monde de leurs eaux. Et je pense qu'il faut les comprendre aussi parce qu'on a vu arriver ces dernières années des bateaux de plus en plus gros, de plus en plus performants, de plus en plus nombreux, qui capturent de plus en plus de poissons. Donc en tant que pêcheur, j'arrive à comprendre le pêcheur britannique qui a voulu foutre tout le monde dehors. Mais moi ça m'arrange pas parce que je vous dis, moi si j'ai plus le droit d'aller dans les eaux britanniques, je suis quasiment condamné à mettre la clé sous la porte.
French fishermen have a track record when it comes to direct action. Back in 2018, they attacked British boats in the Channel in a dispute over scallops. The UK is deploying more fisheries protection vessels in anticipation of a new wave of French anger. But in Boulogne, there are other ways the French can apply pressure on Britain's fishing industry.
To understand the economy of Boulogne, you need to get away from the port and the fishing boats and drive into this sprawling industrial zone. Because what Boulogne has actually done is turn itself into the most important fish processing and distribution centre in all of Europe.
This seafood logistics centre sends out 500 tons of fish every day to 22 countries.
So this is really, it's like an Amazon distribution centre, but the difference is this one is totally and utterly devoted to seafood.
As boss Philippe Lemaire showed me, truckloads of British seafood pass through here every day.
Mais pour nous, nous avons déjà 22 pays qui rentrent tous les jours. Nous avons déjà 22 pays qui rentrent tous les jours.
Oui.
Donc l'impact sera moins fort pour nous. Toutes les industries sont ici à Boulogne. Si les Britanniques coupent le lien avec nous, c'est une catastrophe pour les pêcheurs britanniques.
This has to be a high-speed 24/7 operation. But if the EU doesn't get a deal it likes on fishing, Britain's seafood exports could face major delays.
The whole people working in the fish industry are very concerned about Brexit, especially if it's a hard Brexit, because it will be a problem for everyone. It's not. No, I don't think anyone sees it as an opportunity, because it will be a lot of more constraints, and it will be very difficult. You know, we work on we've got very small shell life. You know, so we have to be very quick. And if we lose 2 or 3 hours at the veterinary service,
Because you mean of new inspections, new rules.
Yeah, with the custom clearance and everything, we lose actually 24 hours, because if the goods miss the departure, obviously the next departure is 1 day later.
Which means that using British seafood, importing it, is going to be much less attractive.
Well, obviously, yeah. The price will be very expensive as well. If all these controls can result in you know, for small loads, it would be more than €1 per kilo extra, and obviously this will make the products really unattractive financially.
Right now, the UK and the EU are indulging in high-stakes brinkmanship over fishing. And the French seem to think they hold powerful cards.
We are in a tough negotiation. And yes, fishing is the first dossier on the table. And unfortunately, I mean, it's not possible, you know, for the French, you know, to give up like that, for 2 reasons. Yes, the fishermen, but we know also what their reaction is going to be. What are they going to do? Blockade in the ports. Here, in Boulogne, probably in Calais, which means that will affect the other side of the industry. All the goods, the 300 billion, you know, pounds of trade that are crossing the channel every year, will be affected if, you know, a couple of boats are blocking, you know, the ports of Calais and Boulogne.
But Jean-Paul, this is insane. Are you telling me that the French are prepared to countenance blocking not just the fishing industry in the UK, but also blocking trade across the channel, all in the interests of a fishing industry in France, which represents a tiny, tiny proportion of your GDP?
I know, but it's symbols. And we know also that Boris Johnson is also playing on symbols on both sides. So let's see. I mean, that's what we all say. That's what President Macron says. That's what President Bertrand, the regional, you know, president here, also said.
Yeah, he's your boss.
He's my boss, yes.
Well, is he bluffing? That's the question.
No,
are you French ultimately bluffing on this fishing matter?
No, unfortunately, we are not.
Fishing is a key obstacle to post-Brexit relations between Britain and Europe, not because of economics. It makes just a tiny contribution to both the British and EU economies, but because of politics. Symbolism and emotion make compromise difficult.
The European Union has said, essentially, the status quo as it currently exists must be maintained if Britain is to continue to have preferential access in terms of trade to the EU market. That's the reality that this government is ultimately going to have to recognise.
I mean, you've summed it up. Why is it in any way fair that 80% of the cod from the channel is caught by French fishermen? These are shared waters in the channel. We have our territorial limits. We need the fish back. And then, look, as we do a trade deal, we're not going to say, we can't say to the Germans, we'll put extra tariffs on your cars because you want to bring them in. 40% of the German cars are sales in in this country are German cars. So fish cannot be, the EU won't want anything else taken out of trade talks and dealt with in a special way, so they can't have fish done in that special way either.
So let us be very specific then. How much fish do you think the EU can legitimately claim to get after the Brexit negotiations are finished? You said it's currently about 60% of the fish in UK waters that they get. What do you think the number should be in the future?
I think the way to do it is look at previous rights that were had right before EU membership, and then do a negotiation with the EU. But
give me a ballpark figure, because the Europeans want to know how serious you're being in this negotiation.
We are being serious, but we're not going to give any sort of... I mean, when I'm buying something from you, am I going to give you my price necessarily? So, no, we will take back control of our waters, and then we will negotiate with the EU on a historic basis.
Taking back control, referring to history, none of that is really very helpful. The Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Agriculture, George Eustace, said the other day that there will indeed be reduced access. So he's already saying to the Europeans, you're going to have to accept a much thinner slice of the pie. The only question is, how thin?
That's right. Well, I mean, he will say that we will take back, I suspect, in negotiations, all of our fish, right? And then we will sit down and look at what historic rights they might claim and do a negotiation. No,
but with respect, that's absurd to say that we Britons have the right to fish all of the fish in UK waters. We have neither the fleet size, nor the manpower, nor the processing capacity to handle that level of fish. It's absurd, and the Europeans know it's absurd.
What needs to be done, and I will repeat this time and time again, is to take control of those waters back. Once we have the fish, have the quota, then we look at what we can fish, what they can claim historically is a right to fish, and that their right to fish, and then we sit down and negotiate. There will have to be a negotiation. Norway negotiates with the EU, everybody does. But I think what is fundamental is that there will be, and there must be, more fish for our fishermen, because we have not got anywhere near the share of fish that we should have from our waters at the moment. I think that the fact that we need to have our rights back and then negotiate as this independent coastal state is absolutely key. And that's what, as a select committee, that's as Parliament, that is what we are absolutely determined that the government will do. Now, it's not easy.
Well, it's easy to grandstand, but you must be aware that there's grandstanding on the other side. President Emmanuel Macron has made it quite clear that he wants the status quo to be maintained, French fishermen to continue to have the rights to fish in UK waters pretty much as they do. And he says if that deal can't be done, there will be no wider trade agreement. And if that's the case, many industrial sectors in the UK, much more important than fishing, are going to suffer. So the leverage here is really with the Europeans.
Don't you think there wasn't always ever going to be grandstanding on either side? I mean, as far as I'm concerned,
isn't it time for you to end the grandstanding?
No, it's not time for us to end the grandstanding when you've got the French president just thinking he can walk all over our waters or swim all over them. He cannot do that. And the French will need to be faced down of all the European states, and I had 10 years in the European Parliament, of all the European states, if any state is going to be difficult, it will be France. And we need to stand up to France, because we will do a deal with them, but they cannot dictate to us. This is the whole idea of leaving the European Union.
Today's catch in Fraserburgh will be on Spanish plates tomorrow. But a year from now, well, who knows? Fishing has become a Brexit litmus test. The fishermen are about to find out what taking back control really means.